One view on this argument. Here's another one. Not everyone is agreeing with that. Another political analyst, Sipho Seepe, says the African peace mission has yielded positive results. He says African leaders knocked on the door and it was opened.
We have to be optimistic in the sense that this African peace mission is also part of the AU Agenda 2063 of silencing the guns, not only in Africa, but globally. And secondly, we had our own young people who were stranded in Ukraine. And at the same time, we are part of the UN system. So there's no way we cannot influence the UN security architect. There's a need for this peaceful dialogue. And there's a need also for the African heads of state to balance their priorities, because the same conflict affects our global index on food prices. It affects also relationships in terms of our role in the UN Security Council and also at the UN General Assembly. So for me, is that this first mission was just a first knock on the door. And I think that door was open from both countries. They were able to engage and they were able to relay also their own views on the conflict. Hence, what African leaders had a 10-point plan that they were going to even present to both parties and engage in further. I would think that let's give it a benefit of doubt for now.
But I suppose the question is going to be, how do we actually measure whether it's been a success at all with this Africa peace mission? Is it going to have any impact on the war over in Ukraine? As we know, the president was over there with several other African leaders as well, meeting both the Ukrainian president and then also the Russian president. They proposed a roadmap to peace, as they're calling it, as we just heard there in that soundbite, including 10 elements, 10 steps, if you will, to try and get that right. So what is the view of political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe joining us this afternoon? Hello to you, Prof. Good to have you on today. So, a success, no success, a PR stunt, or badly managed? Where do you land on this? Good afternoon.
Well, it is a bad PR stunt or PR exercise that went wrong, but also it exposed a number of things. One is logistically, it was a nightmare. A nightmare in a sense that when you have a whole plane that is supposed to be ending somewhere, does not, and that plane has a security detail and it has weapons, and you are told you cannot proceed, that by any stretch of imagination cannot be considered to be a success. Secondly, there is also a failure at the level of intelligence, but also at the level of just common sense. The fact that you go to a country and then you get schooled by your hosts about what the issues are. It was very clear from both Zelensky as well as Putin that the delegation from Africa did not understand what is the terrain in terms of engagement. With Zelensky, he made it very clear to people like Ramaphosa that the idea of simply de-escalation cannot work. For them, the road to peace starts with the withdrawal of the Russian troops from the area, from Ukraine. But for Putin, what we had was something else, that if we're going to talk about peace, we need to also accept the new realities. Effectively, the two leaders could not be so far apart. But what often happens with these negotiations and these peace efforts, you often have people on the ground that make sure that they have an understanding and they brief the principals before the principals go there. You cannot have the principals that find themselves so far off the mark that ultimately all you have to do is to face and claim that you have spoken. Just being seen closer to world leaders does not make it a success. And of course, in South Africa, we suffer from a sense of inadequacy. So when we see our leaders next to other great leaders, we consider that to be success. But part of it is a reflection of our own inadequacy. And then we can come and claim that we've done well. The argument that also says we presented our perspective as Africans and also about our own interest does not wash. Because yes, we can present your own interest, but you need to understand that countries like Russia, like Ukraine, or any other country, they put their interests first. And when they put their interest first, and especially in a war situation, the fact that you are a collateral damage is of interest, is of little interest to them. What you need to present is how a solution that you're proposing will benefit both sides. Yeah. And it is very clear that what both Zelensky and Putin did was to school the delegation from Africa about the most basic things. And that is, first, make sure that you understand the terms of engagement and the terrain of engagement, understand the balance of forces, understand where the people that you want to bring on the table are departing from. And that is the work that your intelligence and your ambassadors and representatives must do on the ground, so that when you go there, you go already with the possibility of nudging people. But to simply say, no, we present our position, is not it's not a form of success. To simply say we want the war to end. Of course, everybody wants the war to end. But when the war exists not because people like war, but because people are there in a war situation to try to advance their own national and personal interest. And if you're not going to address the issue of interest, simply putting a statement that says we want the war to end does not take you anywhere.
I was reading another op-ed which was just suggesting, I forget the name of the publication, it was a UK publication, Prof, and said that what the South African delegation, the African delegation could have done is just emailed this 10-point step to peace over to both of the presidents. It would have had the same effect as well. Another analyst I spoke to this morning, Prof, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, giving me a sense this morning on the SA Morning that this was nothing more than a begging bowl from Africa. Please stop your fighting Russia and Ukraine, because essentially it's affecting our economy and it's affecting our food and it's making me look bad politically. That was the sense this other analyst had. Do you think it's a begging bowl?
Yes, I mean, of course, what the Africans were saying is to say, please, as you are engaged in this war, understand that we are also collateral damage. And in a sense, it's begging. But the wars are not sorted out on the basis of people pleading that they are affected. War are sorted out once the issues that are the source of conflict are addressed. And in this case, the delegation failed to even appreciate the basics of that. So what you had was really the Africans wanted to be seen to be doing something, but at the same time, they found themselves unprepared. But most importantly, the message that was also coming is that you guys must go back and sort out your problems. You have far bigger problems in Africa. As we speak, there are about 7 countries in Africa that are faced with conditions of conflict, where Africans are dying all the time, where Africans are starving, where the Africans are displaced. So the issue is, yes, why don't we just email that and then we sort out our problem? But when you have people who are obsessed with their PR exercises, they can't miss that opportunity. Even the embarrassment that the whole contingent of the security detail is stopped and sent home doesn't even bother you. You just go there as long as you can have nice pictures with a smile. And that is not our definition and assessment of success.
Let me ask you this. How damaging do you think this is now, Prof? Possibly my last question to you. How damaging do you think this is to Africa, South Africa, US relations? How would the US view this, do you think? Because we have BRICS coming up later this year. We have already been told how clear the Americans are with our non-alignment stance. How damaging was this for US-South Africa relations?
Well, I don't think it will be more damaging than if the South Africa were to host BRICS and Putin were to come. Because the posture that has been taken by the United States is that you're either with us or you're not with us. This notion of being on the fence is not something that they support. They would like to have parties that are very clear that you are with us or you're not with us. And if you're not, then don't expect that we would continue to be friends with you. Because, again, it goes back to what the countries are looking for all the time, is a permanent interest and not the permanent friends. So depending on how this pans out, this escapade in Ukraine and Russia is actually meaningless, because it was a PR exercise and it didn't work. And it was not going to work because the issues of interest were never being dealt with.
Professor, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed. Another view of how badly this has gone for the President and our country's government. Professor Sipho Seepe making time for us this afternoon. So as you can hear, there are differing views, but the more common view, the more popular view at the moment seems to be a case of this was nothing more than a PR exercise. And in the end, really, it's not going to make much of a difference to the fight between Russia and Ukraine. As always, we'd love your thoughts. You're welcome to send them to us. You can do that on our Twitter account. It's at eNCA. And we'd love to get your thoughts on social media.